right, hello. Welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 125 for December 1st. It's Open Lines Friday today, and it could also be Low Attendance Day. We'll see. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plantanet. Patrick Anderson is along with me today, Technical Success Manager of Plantanet. And we're going to have this meeting. This is the same one that we hold every Friday this hour. It's an opportunity to get together, talk about Plantanet and low code. It's all skill levels welcome. We have novices and we have those with large amounts of experience, and it's just a great time to share with your other low code enthusiasts, but also to get your problems solved or the things that are questions answered. So any of that is available. All these are recorded and put out on YouTube. So youtube.com/Plantanet gets you access to hundreds of hours of good training content. We'll run this agenda. This is our normal agenda where we say hello. This is an informal meetings format, so we get to say hello, and then we'll pick from among these topics around the campfire. After an hour or so, we go. We turn off the recording, raise a virtual adult beverage, and chat for a few more minutes. So do engage with us, jump in, show and tell, just engage. If you have any noise going on behind you, mute is always a great idea. And you can submit questions and topics in advance. When you don't submit them in advance, then I pick out a couple of things to talk about, and we have some of those today. Our 2023 holiday schedule, we have two of these low code campfires that are canceled for December 22 and 29. So immediately before Christmas, right before New Year's, we'll be continuing our celebrations. And with that, I will say good morning and hello to everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We have a special guest star today.
Yes.
That hasn't joined us lately, so we're glad to see you. And of course, all of our regulars. So anybody have a first call? Matt,
well, I have a little interesting experience. I figured out, ultimately figured it out, but basically what I was trying to do was export and duplicate a table. And my expectation, which was that the import would behave somewhat similar to the, like when you duplicate a field in a form. It says, okay, this field, it's field name dash copy or whatever. What I didn't realize initially was that I was simply overwriting my previous table setup, which in this case, thankfully didn't matter because I didn't make any changes. I was expecting the process to give me like, okay, add the table name dash copy, or, do you want to overwrite this, or some sort of message, but it kind of didn't do that. So, well, yeah, you brought it up here. Yep.
So the good news on that one is that if you were to export it and import it into the same system, it's not going to change anything or delete anything. It's although I think we could clear up that a little with a little. Maybe we should think about the clarifying what's happening there, but exporting an entity and importing it is maybe not what you wanted to do, but it's inherent. It should be safe, right? Because it's just importing the same definition back.
Yes, and ultimately it was safe, which was fantastic because I would have been in a world of hurt otherwise. But so that was not a problem. But then I watched that Low Code Cafe number 90 where you did a deep dive into that. And so what I was then able to do is just simply go into the JSON and change the name of the table and a couple of other fields in there to make it new and different. And it worked like a charm, which was great. Took me a bit to figure it out, but yeah, it was great that it worked.
our assumption in providing that functionality, much like we do with other things, is that it's moving from system to system. So the idea was we provided ability to export from an entity, and you go to from your development system to your production system and able to import the exact same thing. And in the same way, if you make changes in development and then, for example, add new properties to your entity, that you can then export and import those into production, and it would do the same thing. So it will do well at what it's designed to do, but then the fact that you can modify the JSON, the export of those entities is in a JSON format, and so long as you follow the rules, you can do some fun things in there to import it back.
Yes, and it works fantastic. I was just a bit taken aback, like initially, but then once I dug deeper, it became, once I really watched that Low Code Cafe, it became more clear to me what was really going on and what I was actually doing versus what I thought I was doing.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it works great ultimately.
I was going to check here on the forum. I hadn't seen your, I'm subscribed to all these. For some reason, I hadn't seen your question, so I hadn't jumped in to try to help answer. Thank you though for not only posting the question, but then posting back the answers when you found them, so somebody else can find it.
Yes, no problem.
So, cafe number 90, how did you find that? Just a YouTube search?
Well, yes, ultimately that's how I got there, but I vaguely remembered, I think I might have left early or whatever, but I vaguely remembered having this discussion. I think it was with Jim Anthony, but I'm not sure. And so I was like, all right, I know it's in there somewhere. So I went, yes, and I did the search on YouTube, came right to it, and it was good. Did the job.
Good deal. I can't remember. In that one, did we cover the ability even to change field types? I can't remember if that.
Yep, change field types. I think the only gotcha was make sure that the your field type could not be required was one of the things that you couldn't do.
And it has to be compatible, has to be able to make the conversion. So it wouldn't be able to convert an alpha to a numeric, for example, if there was actually alpha data in there. But you can do some things that that the interface won't allow you to do. And I see you said with a backup. Absolutely. Yes. When you're starting to play in that area, you should make a backup. Since we got onto a community forum topic, there was another one that was kind of interesting to me. I saw and hadn't been answered yet, so I'll jump into it. But we had somebody that was getting an error from they're trying to do being able to upload from a form into an S3 storage on Amazon. And they're using a product called Evotiva. And just kind of going over the requirements, that if they went to a traditional DNN folder, it worked. So, the end result of this one is that it's almost certainly something with Evotiva and the way it's structured, but kind of useful to look at the error message. You see the string not supported, does not support seek operations, and but looking at where an error is thrown from gives a clue about it. So you can see it's an Evotiva routine that's talking to Amazon S3. So almost certainly it's not something that we can fix for them because it doesn't come from us. And I'll comment on that. I just thought it might be useful for those of you who pay attention to error messages that the clues are in there. Anybody using any anybody? I've heard of this Evotiva provider before. I didn't know if anyone was using that.
I don't use them for their folder app, which I know that they do have as is shown on the screen here. But what I do use and I think is very popular with them is their DNN backup. They have a DNN backup utility where you can set up scheduled times and whatnot, and it does the backup of the DNN root folder files, the actual website, as well as the database into zip files and puts them in one location for you. And in the process of backing up the website, it removes erroneous log files and stuff like that to make it small. But it's nice because it's one backup routine that basically encapsulates your entire website. But they've had issues with that one as well. I use Dropbox, and for a while I was getting errors with Dropbox because apparently they have a file size limit, and I was exceeding that. And it's not a Dropbox limit. I think it was like I said, it was an Evotiva file limit. So basically, what I ended up having to do was really slim down my database.
You always push the limits, Ben. I don't know what it is about that.
I like to push the envelope.
Ben,
All
just
right.
out of curiosity, what was the limit? Do you recall?
I honestly don't fully recall. I want to say back then, because this happened many years ago, because I've been using them for years. I want to say back then it was 500 megabytes was the limit of the file that Evotiva was able to upload. So what I ended up doing at the time for that particular website that was having an issue, I went in, I had to streamline the transaction log. I had to get rid of, old data in tables that were like, 4, 5, 6 years old. That was just really useless data at that point. And once I was able to shrink that database down to under 500 megs, it uploaded fine. But if I'm not mistaken, since then they've modified. They periodically come out with updates. They came out with an update that exceeded that broke out of that 500 meg limit.
Cool, thank you.
So I've dropped back to first call. So I'm still trying to get somebody to bring a problem or a question.
Well, I have one.
Good.
Although I'm sure, Dale, if you couldn't get an answer, I don't know if I will anywhere else, but you never know. It was that email that I sent you the other day. I'm just curious, if anyone here has utilized the action to do asynchronous actions. And I take it by the silence that no one has really used that. All right. Yeah, no, it was just an issue that I was coming across with scoping, specifically when using the asynchronous action command. I found a workaround for anyone else who's using it that may come across this. Basically, what I found, and I think a lot of it has been addressed, I think, Dale, you said in the latest versions, if not all of it. But if anyone happens to be using a version that is not at the latest, what basically comes up a lot is what's called a DNNDI scoping error. You'll see that in your event log left and right. That's basically if you call any token, any workflow, anything like that from within the asynchronous operations, you're going to get that scoping error. My way to work around that is right before you go into that asynchronous action, just before that, any calls that you have that returns data from those like tokens or whatever, put them in a create update token and put them in a variable first. And then just call the variable.
you know, the context is correctly being passed in.
Exactly. So once you put it into a variable, those variables are accessible within scope to this asynchronous call, but you can't call inside of here what Dale is showing on the screen. You can't add an action there to call a my token or anything like that because for whatever reason the context is a little wonky on that. So there's a workaround for that. The only problem is that I found one action that no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to work, and that was the logging to the error log, the admin log.
So
No matter which way I called it, it didn't like it.
So just to level set on this a little bit, first of all, Ben is talking about version 1.18 of Plant and App. We're on 1.25, and we've done a lot of work in the last couple of versions to make execute actions asynchronously to improve it and make it work right. So hopefully these are talking about issues that have since been solved. But
Hopefully.
for anybody who's bumping into this later or who doesn't happen to use this already, the idea here is that you can set up some actions that you're going to set the server to working on, but from the perspective of this particular thread, it executes immediately. I mean, this starts the work going on a different thread and then continues on with your workflow. So something that's long running that you don't need to wait for, you can run it in this. So any actions that you add to a execute actions asynchronously block will happen, but outside of the scope of this. You won't get a return back from it. They're just executing. Is that a fair statement of what's going on there?
Yep, pretty much.
Patrick, have you happened to use this? I'm calling.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I was when Ben first asked, I was kind of trying to remember. I mean, I'm aware of it, and I think maybe I played with it, but I haven't really used it. No.
It came really handy for me because I have a situation with one of my sites where the client, bless you, the client wants a lot of these custom reports, I guess, is the best way of saying it. But again, it's a workaround for other situations. So basically, normally what I would do is I would write the SQL to pull out the data they want and dump it on a grid, let's say. But Action Grid currently has a 30-second timeout that can't be changed. So if your SQL statement or your data source takes longer than 30 seconds, your grid is going to time out. So what I ended up doing was I created code to build all the data, do all the number crunching, do everything that needs to be done, and then spits it out into a local table already formatted. And all the grid has to do is just display it. But that takes time. So they've added now, I've lost count as to how many reports, but I'm probably upwards of like 20. I don't want them to, they have to be refreshed periodically, like every 10 minutes. I don't want to hold up one report's running because another one is already running, and that's where the asynchronous comes in. I run one command and it's got all 20 reports as asynchronous, so within each one, each report can just run. Some of them will run in 30 seconds, some of them may run in 3 minutes, so forth, so on, but they're not dependent on each other. So I could just kick off all of the reports at once and just let them all run on threads, and when they finish, they finish.
So I'm displaying on the screen, and in response, I think, to a request by Ben, we added in our SQL select, we added the query timeout so that it's not stuck at 30 seconds. But again, this is something not available at version 1.18. So
yeah. Is that also for the advanced and not just SQL select?
I sure hope so, but let's just take a look. Yep.
Yay, something to look forward to.
Yes, indeed. So, yep, thank you for being the poster child for when you're stuck at an earlier version, you're putting up with things that we've already fixed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it goes to show you how important it is to keep up to date, because when you get stuck behind like I am, you don't get to benefit from all the new stuff that comes out. But hopefully it will be soon. I've been bugging these people to let me work on this, so I'm hoping at this point, like February, maybe March, to start the process of doing a complete clean rebuild of their websites.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be interesting.
Back on execute actions asynchronously, we've mentioned before that Plantain App has a product, Bazinga, which is a artificial intelligence implementation to where you can have assistants to do your to help you do certain tasks that you define, and we can go more into that. But within Bazinga, we make heavy use of execute asynchronously. If you've worked at all with the chat GPTs of the world, you know that when you send off a request, that it might take anywhere from 5 seconds to 60 seconds to answer the question that you're trying to do. And so we did not want to block the user while that was going on. So we submit the request asynchronously to Bazinga, to AI, and then go on to set up the screen and do other things so that the user can perceive that things are happening without just being in a dead screen waiting for things to complete. So that's one of our use cases, and probably one of the reasons that got some good attention in these last couple of versions. Good. Somebody else has something they want to bring?
Hi guys, Jerry here. This is a kind of a wonderful way to segue in on Ben's working with an earlier version. Ben, I feel your pain. I am currently in the middle of taking one of our largest clients from 0 to the latest version of Plant App, and I'm working through the versions as we go now. And my question is a quick tech support question, kind of like you. I'm asking the question if anybody else has seen this. We're up to 1.18 and our scheduler does not work. It will not fire any of the schedules. So on our dev server or our dev site, I went to 119 and I actually got the scheduler to work, but it's very inconsistent. And by that, I mean, I have a schedule, Dale, to go off of what you and I were working on a week or so ago. I have a schedule that just fires me an email just for testing. And I want it to send me this email every minute. And it will do it a few times and then stop. If I reset the app pool or I reset the restart the application, I mean, from the server tab in DNN, it starts firing off and it'll run again for a few minutes and then it'll just stop. But at 118, I've got nothing. At 119, I've got some inconsistencies. My ultimate question is, have you seen this before? And do I just upgrade my way out of it? Or is there a fix from where I'm at? Because as Ben would attest to, I can't just keep jumping up these upgrades because I have other issues that I need to repair before I go into the 1.2 world and beyond. And so I'm just kind of in this little middle of the road place right here, hanging out around 1.19 right at the moment. And so anybody got any suggestions on why my scheduler's weird? Talk to me, Ben.
I don't know if it's exactly what you're experiencing, but I will say that I had similar experience where it became erratic for a while. I couldn't figure out why some events, some automations would trigger and others wouldn't. Ultimately, what I found was that sometimes if your automation, when it's running, encounters some weird hiccup, it can sometimes interrupt the process where in the scheduler history table, the end date is never stamped. It stays null. If that happens, the scheduler looks at that job as still running and will not run again. It gets stuck in running mode. So what you have to do is look into that scheduler history table. Make sure you don't have any null values in any of those history entries. If you do, your scheduler might be seeing that as an open job that's currently running, and because of that, it's not triggering it again.
Fantastic. And by looking for these nulls, are you suggesting that I go to a particular table in SQL and do it, under the belly and go find those nulls and see what's going on?
Basically, I mean, what I basically did is I have it. If you want, I can send it to you. I can export it and send it to you. But I have a self-contained action grid that basically will pull out every single job that you have, every automation, and it'll tell you what the current status is, if it's running or not, if it is running, when it started. And then it'll also tell you how many minutes, hours, days it's been running. So if you see something that should be only firing and taking 30 seconds to complete, and it's been running for the last 2 hours, there's a problem. There's a button right next to it that I also added called force stop. And then
And
what
by
it'll do is
and
it'll
by
insert a date into that null field, into the field that's
okay,
null, and thereby clearing it out, making it look like it's been completed.
okay. So you're not deleting the record, you're just updating that
No,
date to make it seem that it's reasonable again.
exactly.
Okay. Um,
Just completing
so
the circuit, so to speak.
got it. The I know I think I heard you say just a minute ago that you're kind of hanging around with one or two of your clients around 1.18 or 1.19 as well. And so, yeah, I thought maybe this might clear itself as we go into 1.20 and beyond. But I'm kind of at a point going into the weekend where I don't want to be doing any more upgrades today. So I want to try and find a solution at 1.19, and I will certainly go look at that and see. Um, Again, in my test environment, I only have one automation running for my test. That's it. But if things are working properly, I obviously have 10, 20 of these automations going. And so, Ben, are you checking these things very vigorously, or are you finding that you just don't have that problem that often? And then when you do have a problem, you just go to your grid and deal with it.
I was encountering the problem often enough that I created that grid to track it.
Hmm.
But since then, what I've been doing is I've been trying to streamline and tweak my automations to do the best that I can to prevent whatever errors were happening inside that were potentially causing
Yes,
the
of
those
course.
events to just kind of like flip out and
Hmm.
not complete. Um, it happens much less now than it did, but occasionally it does still happen. So basically, part of my daily routine is I come in the morning, and the very first thing I do is I open up that grid and I just look to see if, like, overnight, did something start and not finish? Is there anything that's been running for, like, 8 hours? Because
Got
nothing
it.
I have should be running more than, at the very maximum, maybe 5 minutes.
Got it.
So if I see anything with a really long execution time that's still running, I know it's a dead
Absolutely.
thing, and I just hit force quit. It'll insert the date into the null, and then the next trigger time for the cron comes,
Hmm.
it should trigger normally.
Got it. Understood. No worries. Final question, and we'll get back to some real problems. Is this a complex uh, SQL set of tables that you're dealing with, or is it just one table that houses everything, and I can just go look at this, or do I have to do any joins or anything to achieve the data that you're talking about?
Uh, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I'm not going to say that it is terribly complex
Hmm.
in the sense of looking at the history table. It's pretty cut and dry, but there will be joins because you have to join that history table to the jobs table and whatnot.
Okay.
And then, the way I wrote my grid, it does do a couple of little complex things just so that the joins work quickly, because again, the history table, if you're not going in there and cleaning it up, the history table has no self cleanup. So depending on how often your jobs run, your history table could run in the millions upon millions of records.
That's
And that's what's
fantastic.
happening in my case. I'm cleaning it up now to make it less, but the problem is that when you have that many records, inner joins can sometimes take quite a while if you don't do them
Sure.
quite right. So I
Mhm.
tweaked it to make sure that it's, doing it as quickly as possible. Oh,
I'll find it. I'll do some research on that now while I'm listening to you guys.
I
But
put that
I
up
really
there.
appreciate that.
Yeah, you added it to the campfire a while back. Let's
Well, there
see.
you go.
I wonder if it's even yeah, June of 22. You contributed this, and
There you go,
so
Jerry.
Jerry, if you have access to this, and I believe you do, you can get into and you can either copy it as he's put
I
it, or
totally
take a
forgot
look
that I
and see
put
what
that up there.
and
Eh,
with that conversation, as soon as you guys started talking about this, I realized one of the things are you clearing out your schedule history, Jerry?
In this particular case, no. And so I'm going to go investigate that. We've never really touched it. So uh,
So
maybe that's
schedule
something that needs to be
history,
done. We may be that guy with those millions and trillions of records, Ben, right
and
now. So,
and this could actually be the issue if this has just gotten so huge that
okay.
perhaps um, it's erratic because things aren't finishing in a reasonable time. So this is a job that I have instituted a long time ago, and this happened to be showing it from a client site, but um, something like this where you keep X number of days of history. Uh, there's, I don't, in my case, it's just kind of like for if something goes wrong, I need some ability to do some research, but I'm never going to go back and audit whether or not something ran 3 years ago, right? So keeping 30 days or something that makes sense in your case might be useful. What
And
else?
maybe a thing to add here is that I think around 2 months ago we did a lot of work to make scheduler recover from all sorts of things. Like, for example, on recycle, you'd get the same behavior. If a job was running, it will keep saying it's running even though it was not running. So this were fixed a couple of months ago. So yeah, one more reason to get to the latest. And I think, Jerry, if that's the plan, I'm not sure what they would advise. Maybe they would advise better than I because he's seen lots of things. But I would push to go towards the latest with some of these issues before saying that. Otherwise, you'll struggle solving it in each versions, and it might waste a lot of time.
Thank you, Bogdan, for that. I cannot agree more, and I long for the day that this one particular client is finally at 1.25 and beyond. And that's where we're headed, and we're not letting up through the holidays. We're going to get ourselves there. And like I said, I didn't know if I could update my way out of this. One final comment is my schedule history table, folks, only has 724,716 records in it. So maybe that's something I should concern myself with. Would it be okay if I don't need any history at all, that I don't delete the last 30 days? Could I just delete the entire table and start from scratch, particularly on my dev site, and just see if that fixes my problems, Dale? Without,
Yeah,
I don't care about these history records at all, but I don't want to damage the scheduler in any way. But there you go. That's something to consider.
Yeah, I would. My guess is that deleting them is not going to cause any problem, and the worst case is that you might have to do an app restart after you delete
Got it.
to get your
Okay.
jobs to start running again. So
I'll do that as we're chatting. Okay. Thank you so much. That gives me some great comfort, and probably the source of many of our scheduling issues is that we just have not taken care of this tables like maybe we should. So, okay. Thank you.
while we're here and happen to be looking at this job that I created, I do the same thing for event log. I just in this case keep 30 days, just keep it from growing beyond where I want to. I delete records, and this may have been something more related to an earlier version. In this particular case, the site log was growing very big. There were orphaned exceptions that I got rid of as well. So the DNN table had a bunch of exceptions that we know. Oh, this would be after you delete the event log. Maybe there's exceptions left that don't exist anymore. So I'll just put these up in here. Whoops. Yeah, we're going to leave just in case you want to consider doing some of those things as well in your DNN.
Just one thing, if I can add. I know this came up in I think one of the other campfires that we had. I don't know if it was during off camera or not, but there's one other table that people might want to look at. And that's only if you heavily utilize APIs, but there is an API audit table as well. And that one has, the same kind of situation as the scheduler. It just continually grows for every single call of an API. So you might want to look at that, because that was another one that I didn't even realize was there. And my database was 10 gigs in size. And when I looked, about 8 gigs of it was out of that API table, with I don't remember, it was like 76 million records or some ridiculous number.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah.
So that
That's
took me a
awesome,
little while
Ben.
to
Thank you.
clean that up, but that's another one you want to look at if you also notice that your database is growing in size.
Righto. Righto. Definitely, because I have written mobile app software uh, for this particular client, and it's, I mean, heavily API driven, you know.
Well, I never knew about that table because I never had an issue. I only figured it out after about 3 months, where I created some new APIs that were literally being called maybe every 10 seconds, depending on usage of a site. I mean, it blew up on, it was a very quick call. I mean, it brought back data within milliseconds, but there were so many calls so often, and every single call gets logged in that audit table. And I wasn't using APIs prior to that heavily. But when I added these new ideas, these new features that utilize it heavily, all of a sudden, 3 months later, I'm looking at my backups and I'm like, why are my backups exploding in size? And when I analyzed the tables to see which table was the, culprit and the offender, the API audit table was the one that was taking like 90% of the database size. And I was like, what in the world?
And to your point, what did you do about it? Did you again write some system in your scheduler to keep that table clean? And as long
Absolutely.
as your
So,
scheduler stays clean, it stays clean, et cetera, et
yep.
cetera.
So I have a schedule in there that runs on, I believe, a 30-minute basis. Because like I said, that API call is running every few seconds. So, you know, within a minute, I could add like 30,000 entries. Um, so what I did is every 30 minutes, I believe, it runs this scheduler, and I basically have a limitation of how many entries I allow per day and how many days of history I allow. So it's like a maximum of 30 days, but every day I don't allow more than, for example, 30,000 entries. So at 30,000 for the day, it starts dropping off the older ones that it finds. So it only retains 30,000 for the day at a maximum of 30 days. It keeps that audit table relatively small so that it doesn't, eat up backups and stuff like that.
Fantastic. You've given me something to do today for sure.
I'm pretty sure you could find a SQL script that would list all this number of records in all your tables. And so
Yeah, I have that. It shows number of records and how much megabytes it's actually using it. If you want, I'll post that up on Campfire, and Jerry, if you want, I could send you a copy of it.
I'm really big on just using my SSMS to determine that. If you right click on the database, there's in SSMS, there's tools to give you that disk usage by the top tables is one. And I'm kind of paying attention to it all the time, looking to see what's finding its way to the top. And I have yet to see those scheduled tables and those find their way to the top. most of my top tables are something that I created myself, and it's not necessarily intrinsic to Planta app or even DNN for that matter. But I definitely want to go investigate this and see, particularly on the scheduler real quick. But again, thank you. This is very informative for me. Very informative.
All right. My initial efforts to do this live in real time didn't work out, but we'll look forward to yours. And thanks for your other contribution. All right, so what else? I promised that if anybody was watching Low Code Cafe and we did mastering the filter forms, the ability to filter listings with forms. If anybody had any follow-up questions or suggestions for that topic, I'd be happy to get into that. I was very glad that I had Patrick on board because there was a couple of things that I didn't know about the product that he was able to bring into the mix. So it's amazing. It's so hard to know all of it. I didn't realize there was an action, for example, to change a tab from one tab to another.
Hi Dale, it's Mark. I was watching, I was there. I added a note right before you guys cut off. I thought that I would just contribute to ask that it would be nice to see the filter work such that it didn't do the initial fill of the grid until a filter was applied. Just an idea, something you could
Something
check.
like that.
I see nothing. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I made a change similar to along those lines, just playing with it a little bit more after the episode was over. The filtering form, excuse me, the listing, what I did is said that I happen to be using the getter session at this point to pass in the things that we need. And so for target name, instead of defaulting to blank, I'm now defaulting to no data, which is, there is no name on file that includes no data. So, and it could be done better than this, more efficiently than this, but this is the direction that I took just for a quick demonstration of it. So when the data source returns 0 records, you get the message that appears in the settings. And so I just said, please select a filter to begin. So the end result is you get this. So you browse to the page, you get this, you click in and can pick a filter, for example, and then it goes to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that works for me. I thought maybe you would include that in your show.
You're telling me I know this, but I thought somebody else might be.
Well, yeah.
Well, so
that's the same thing that I've done with a client, except I used ZZZZZ, which I like. No data looks nicer, but we just basically decided on a series, of characters that would that we were pretty sure would never exist. Yeah. Yep. And that way you get it to load. Especially when you're working with the huge data set, you get the listing to load without any data, and then you only ever get data once you do a filter, and that really helps that solved an issue for us.
And I'll just point out, this again is not particularly efficient because I happen to be doing a like on target name, so it's still considering all 800,000 rows before it comes up with an answer. So this is not the most performant one. You probably want to pick something that it can very easily make a determination, more of an equals condition that so that it doesn't, so you don't task SQL to go through all the records before it comes up empty. So anyway, but yeah, it is interesting to have around as I pointed out in the episode, I have a record that has 800,000 records in it. I generated this random data, and it's handy to have that around to try and test, because so much of what we work with and test with are small data sets, and it looks like it's great, and then when it grows to be something more on Ben's level, it's non-performant, and so having a lot of test data gives us the ability to look for things and build it where it's efficient.
You know, I had another use case that maybe you would like to address, and maybe you think it's an outlying case, but you know, I do a site for a high school that has a new performance each year. Like in this case, it's a cabaret performance. The date, I don't know the dates for future years in advance, so when they get entered, then the database becomes aware what the new date is. I would like the action grid to always assume the latest, but give me the ability to choose previous dates to fill the grid. So, and I like running the parameters, the criteria from the session variable. So I kind of thinking that what would be cool is if I could pre-fill the session variable on page load. And that's just where my head went, but there might be a better way to do that. And I don't know if that's an outlier case or not.
I don't think it's an outlier case. I think it's a good one. I started down this path where I had a date range, and we didn't really get to put this onto the form. But for example, I had implemented a date add, so it's looking at the past for a particular time period. And so, for example, I could have it default to between 30 days and today, 30 days in the past and today, by providing those defaults. And then in the filtering form, if we collect these, it would be very easy to set these variables as the result of a dropdown. So without actually going to all the work, but having a drop-down field that's something like that, where it offers 3 choices and defaults to current, that you could then set these variables, days age oldest and days ago recent, based on the answer to this question, and it would always default to looking at a particular period, but then allow other selections. And you don't have to get into exactly the drop-down can be expressed in terms that make sense to the user, and then you can manipulate that, translate it into SQL that does the result. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I see a drop-down that a user would have to interact with. So I would want the option for current to be currently chosen and used in the grid on page open.
Right.
So are you suggesting that maybe the form, maybe on init, would set the session variable to the current choice?
Right. We can, it won't take long to make this happen, so we can work our way through it. Where I'm creating my tokens here, the ones that we're going to need to set are these. So oldest and recent. So we could do something like, actually, I'm just going to copy this one and move it up. So it would be something like days oldest being 30 days and recent being 0, and then we'll do some cloning here again. If we need a better name than drop down, call it period, and copy that. So if period equals to last year, so say period is last year, then it would be 365 and 0. And then finally we need to make these into token, put them into session all at the same time, just like these. So let's say set session days ago oldest is equal to days ago oldest, and days ago recent. So we're passing them from the form based on their selection. Whatever these logics, these two things come up with, we should have a third one for all time, right?
I'm sorry, I missed where is this being put in? Is this a button that you're doing, or is it on form initiate, or what?
Sure. This is I'm sorry. This is my apply filter form, apply filter button. So the logic is saying it's going to default to 30 and 0, the most current period. It will be if you did last year, it's going to be 365 and 0, setting these values. I'll go ahead and do the last one here as well. This is going to be year, and then this one is going to be for all time, and so depending on the dropdown, it's going to pick one of these three values to set these days ago values, and then in my in the final, I push those into a session variable, and that's the same session variable that's being consumed on the data source.
And then you refresh the action grid, right?
Yes. So if we select filter and say that we want the last year time period.
Okay. So what I'm also asking is, how can we preset the session variable on page open to be equal to the latest?
Yep. So in the data source, it's setting it. These are the default values for a session. So it's setting days ago oldest. If there is no value of it in either of these two places, the get or the session, it's going to set it to 30 and this to 0. So it's the same thing as current.
Okay. Got it. So it's actually filtering the data, not setting the session variable, which achieves the same result.
Yeah, it's in this quick example, let's do it. You could do it other ways, right? But in this case, it's just using the, and I'm going to take out this filtering. It's going to come up automatically with these values when as soon as the page loads, right?
Right. Okay, very good.
Can I share something?
Please,
Is it possible to share my screen really quick?
please. I'm
Yes,
sorry, I didn't see you
absolutely.
had your hand up. You're so polite.
Okay, share screen.
Thank you, Dale.
Now, I'm not sure if this is basically what you're kind of looking for, Mark, but I have a application, a timeline that I created for our client, and it's kind of similar, I think. So view all timeline items, past, current, and future. It defaults to current. As you can see, there's, oh, hold on, let me move the zoom toolbar. It was in the way. You could see there's nothing in the URL or anything like that. It defaults to current.
Okay.
And then at any point, so like if I say view past, just have to change the drop down. It'll add a filter into here, and then it reloads the grid based off of the new filter parameters as soon as it shows up. There we go. So like I said, it does have its current, and at any point in time, you can flip it to whatever you want to see, and it will change that listing to whatever you want. And then I'll just show you really quick the back end of it. This, I don't know why this is happening.
How did you
Our network is a
pre-fill?
little slow. What was that?
Yeah, how did you pre-fill the current? Was it similar to what Dale did?
So I don't use session variables. So basically, it's a drop down. These are the item values. So A is for all, P, past, C, current, F, future. This is the text, and that's the value. This is what gets passed to the URL. So what I basically did is inside the bind expression, I just do this little guy here. So I apply a filter, direct, rather, my apply filter button, I click it, which is what changes the URL. And then here, it basically is looking at the query string. It's defaulting to C for current. And, these are other items. And then basically in my where clause, this is SQL's version or a way of doing it where you can have kind of an if statement inside your where clause. So there's it's part of a join, but
Right.
same idea here. There's multiple places where I use it, but basically it's saying, let me go back up here because this is easier to read. This is basically saying if the filter is for all, then 1 equals 1. That means pull everything, no filter. If the filter is P for past, then the phase's end date has to be less than today. If it's C, then today has to be between the start and end date of the phase. And if it's for future, then the phase start date has to be greater than today. And that's pretty much it.
And it really is the same concept. You're defaulting to C in your case. In my case, I'm doing the date select. My use case is a little bit different, but I'm passing the defaults directly on the by defaulting the value of the variable being passed in, and then your form sets it as well. So it's kind of the same concept, but nicely you're letting SQL do the work. I was letting the form do the work. It's really depends on your use case, right?
Exactly.
Looks good. I appreciate it.
Great. Okay, so with that, we have coasted into our the end of our hour. We're gonna adjourn for afterglow segment, so hang around if you can. But we're glad that you joined us for Low Code Campfire. We'll be here again next week in the same 10 o'clock Central Time hour. So Happy low coding. Bye, everyone.